I'm Kristine. I'll be refuting Alex's speech, or in fact speech, with nuclear weapons. So his claim that I'm responding to is the U.S. government has improperly handled its arsenal of nuclear weapons. His first secondary claim is that technology for controlling nuclear arms needs to be improved and better maintained. And his second secondary claim is people overseeing nuclear arms seem unqualified. He only had two claims. So my response to the first claim is one of the supporting points that he used for this claim is that the weapons are managed and maintained on 8-inch floppy disks, rendering them obsolete and untrustworthy because they're old. The issue behind that wasn't mentioned is that the United States hasn't produced any new nuclear weapons in 20 years. That's why they're still maintained on the 8-inch floppy disks, because they were made 20 years ago when the disks first came out. Also, he says that the information to keep track of these nuclear weapons is slowly but surely deteriorating. Again, these weapons were created 20 years ago, so although things may fall apart, like the blueprints and things like that, they are also dismantled. Okay, according to the NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration, this is an organization that's responsible for maintaining our nuclear weapons, and our nuclear weapons have expiration dates, or they die and they get dismantled, and then they're disposed of by implosion, and that NNSA ensures that this is happening. So even though the blueprints are deteriorating, to update them, a big part of the problem is that there were no nuclear weapons since 1990, and that they need to push to update existing ones, which wasn't considered when they were built. So the United States knows that it's slightly outdated, and they're moving over the next decade to upgrade them, but it's going to cost us $355 billion to maintain and rebuild the nuclear arsenal. This is according to the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office. His second claim was that people overseeing nuclear arms seem unqualified. His first supporting point was officers were caught cheating on a proficiency test. The second point was that the second point was that the Air Force officers were falling asleep and leaving the blast door open. My challenge to the first point was that according to the Department of the Air Force, there's an intensive process to become qualified to handle nuclear weapons, and there's 4 stages. There's an academic stage, which is classes. They all have to take academic classes and pass an academic exam, and score at least an 80%, and this is done once a year. The qualifications is they go through scheduled training, and then there's also the certification stage, and that has another 3 parts to it. So there's really, really intensive training in order to handle these weapons. So in order to qualify, they were caught cheating, and he generalized, saying that would happen. That's happening all the time. So, okay, well, my first counterclaim to the first part, or first secondary, My first counterclaim is that the U.S. government has specific protocols for maintaining the nuclear arsenal, and that was going to be with the academic training, the qualification, and the certification. And then my second counterclaim to the secondary piece of claim was that in order to be permitted to handle the weapons, one must successfully complete the extensive training program. Thank you. That's my reputation.
We start off well labeling the main and secondary claims. You get to the first point and you've labeled it pretty clearly, and then you basically have a couple of points that you're making which I think need just a little bit of explanation, and then there's one point that I'm not sure you know what the reason is that you're presenting this information on. The first point basically is that the reason the materials are old is because we're not manufacturing new material here. We're not building new weapon systems all the time, and it's been 20 years since we built any of these things. Okay, so that's a good point. That would explain why the older systems are still in place, and maybe they're not made to work with a newer system, or imposing a newer system on them doesn't make sense, since ultimately they're going to be replaced at some point, and then a new system would be appropriate. That I can kind of understand. Then you get on this issue of dismantling the arguments, and I don't think you know what it is you're doing with the dismantling issue. It doesn't seem to be going anyplace. That they have an expiration date, that's an interesting point. And that they get dismantled, I think that's an interesting point. Maybe the argument that you ought to be making is that this is going to be a smaller problem over time because we are dismantling more and more of these weapons on a regular basis. We've made agreements to reduce the number that we have. We're voluntarily reducing the number that we have. We have not yet begun to update those things yet that would need to be updated, but we have a projection of $355 billion. When we do upgrade that, that's what it's going to cost us to do. And that sounds like a pretty substantial investment in our safety there. That's kind of the way that argument has to go about. And you can make that argument, you're just kind of a little bit lost there, trying to figure out what it is you're saying at that point. On the second issue, it should be a little bit more straightforward. I think you've got the right idea here. Look, training is required in order to participate in this process, and it's extensive training. They have to do pass the test, they have to do certification, there are a couple of other things apparently they have to do. We never get much a description on this. That these people were caught cheating seems to suggest that somebody is watching, at least, and that they didn't get certified as a consequence. Isn't that the way the system's supposed to work at that particular point? So they got tossed out. Is there any information to believe that we don't have an adequate number of people who are prepared to do this? Did the advocates say that? No, they didn't provide any of that. They just got this one case in one isolated situation, which I'm not sure is safe to generalize from, of some people cheating. That's terrible that they did that. But sometimes lazy people do lazy things. That doesn't necessarily mean that we were all endangered as a consequence of that issue. We got plenty of backups to all of these kinds of things. That's the way I think that you needed to make that argument. And again, the same sort of thing. You've got the right issue in there, but it's not coming out as clearly as you want. And I don't know if you just got tongue-tied because you're looking at the page in front of you and forgetting, here's what the argument is. That's one of the things that I see a lot in all of the speeches, and that is everybody's looking at their pages and think, it's like, I've written this wonderful essay that I've got here, and I want to give the essay. It's not an essay, it's a speech, and you need to tell us, here are the claims, let's keep them simple, let me explain what the point is I'm trying to make and tell you why my position is right. That's all you need to do. And you have stuff in your presentation that would allow you to do that, but you're having a little bit of trouble getting to it. And I think that's because you got wrapped up in some of the detail stuff on the page. That's my guess anyway. All right, thank you.